So welcome to Friday. We're basically going to be doing review stuff today on methods, going through some of the practice problems here. Um, so we've been doing Unit 7 on methods here. We went through the learning activity with the weather program, and we worked on creating a weather program. I had mine doing the parsing the temperature of a JSON file and returning that here and then printing it out. And then you were supposed to do something like humidity or some other measure. And then for the assignment, you want to try to make this more generic. And rather than saying like parse temperature, you want to just parse some string and be able to pass in like the temp or the humid or some string you want to search through, and it should grab that characteristic tag here for this. So if you have trouble with that, you're welcome to work on that today. And I'll go through a couple of the practice problems here. Remember, we have these practice problems that you can do. Now, next week, we're going to have our midterm test, and it'll be a week from today, basically, next week. And then next week, we'll spend some time reviewing for that during the week. And we'll talk about doing practice problems for that. Practice problems are a great way to review for and prepare yourself for the midterm exam. Remind yourself of all these and practice these various programming techniques. It is so important that I'm going to give you extra credit if you do practice problems here. So I just opened up the Unit 8 so you could see it. In Unit 8, there's a special assignment for extra credit for practice problems here. And you can complete this assignment multiple times, up to 5 times here. You have to do a different practice problem each time, of course. But you can work on talk about which practice problems and do the practice problem, do 5 different ones for that. So again, you can get some extra credit by working on that. And again, we'll look at practice problems today, and then next week we'll also do that, do some more practice problems. All right, so let's go back and talk about methods here. So again, what we've been looking at is how to write a method and how do we pass parameters to a method for this. We've talked about having a method like this is a method called print twice. And it's in the parentheses here are its parameters, and it takes one parameter, which is a string, and we're calling it S. And that means that anywhere in this method, we can use that parameter S as a variable here. And then when we call that method down here in the parentheses, we pass in it expects a string as an argument, so we pass in a string here. So S, when print twice is executed, we'll go up there, we'll initialize S to this string, and then we'll do each line of code until we're done with that method, and then we'll return back here. So again, these arguments of pass information up to a method, and basically they're used like local variables within that method. When we're done with the method, when we've done all this, we return back to the calling method and keep going. When we return, there's 2 ways of returning. One is if our method is a void, we just return there. We can also pass in parameters. Let me get down to that. Here, we can return a value here. So methods like math.absolute value, when we specify some a parameter, the method will return something. So we'll keep that like as an error or something like that. So we can use these expressions, these calls inside a print statement, inside an expression like this, or on the right side of an assignment method. And so when we write our own methods here, like here's calculate area of a circle, and it calculates that area and returns that result, we need to make sure we say public static double, and then we'll return that. And when we call this area, we need to save that result somewhere here. So when we call it, they don't have that shown here. Yeah, they're not showing. So we'll call that. So I'm going to talk about a couple of those ones in practice problems. So why don't you figure out what you want to do here? I think I'm going to start and do this times table one. It's a nice simple one. It requires some parameters, but not any return types here. A lot of these ones will have some starting sample code and ask you to take this sample code and make it into procedures for that. We often call this refactoring. Refactoring is just a term for reorganizing a code. We don't make it do anything differently. We just reorganize it there. I always think like refactoring is like when you go and you have your messy closet and you reorganize your closet into bins and stuff like that. So it's much more organized, put labels on everything. That's refactoring. Everything's still in there, it's just much more organized and easier to use for that. Okay, so I'll stop for a little bit. Think about if you want to do some of the assignment, if you want to work on that, or if you want to do a practice problem. And remember, you can submit the practice problem you do for extra credit. So I'm going to walk through this review exercise on the times tables. So feel free if you want to listen along. If you don't, if you work on your own thing, that's fine too. Don't worry about it. I'm recording it also. We'll post that there. So this is the times tables one. So again, we're printing off this multiplication table, 10 by 10 table that we're printing off. And we have some sample code here. So I'm just going to do that, do a new project and call it like unit 7. 7. Table. I'm going to take this main method and just paste it into there. Like I say, this shouldn't change it. We'll just reorganize it here. So I want to kind of understand how this works first here. I can run it and see how it is. I can look at it as I go. One thing we haven't talked at all about is debugging. So I mentioned that. And let's just talk about breakpoints and debugging and how that might work. If you click on the numbers here, you can set what is called a breakpoint here. And then there are two, besides the run, there's this run with debugging. So if I run that, it will go down to wherever my breakpoint is and stop here. And it'll show me my arguments. It'll also show me output. And then I can step through this, step over each line. So I'm at this for loop, I can do that. I'm at my next for loop, I can do that. And then again, under variables, I can see that X is 1 and Y is 1 here. And I can kind of step through. Now we print off the product. It calculates the product. 1 times 1 is 1. And again, there's different ways, but usually to step over is a good way to just step through each one. Now I'm going through my for loop, and now Y is 2, and it's printing off. And I can watch my output. It's going to print off each one bit by bit. And so I can kind of just follow through. I'm in this inside for loop, just going through this, printing off this whole line. And then finally I go to the next line. I print off a line feed, and then I'll start again, printing off that. So now I'm at the next line, and I can see I'm just kind of stuck in this for loop, the inside for loop. And I can actually watch my variables. Here, my inside for loop is at 3, 4, 5. And each time I'm calculating my product, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And now I should get out of that loop. So now I go out of that loop to this next print statement. And so I can kind of watch as I go. So I print off 2 lines. So this inside for loop prints off 1 line, and the outside for loop does multiple lines. I'm just going to run the rest of this to see how it works. So again, sometimes that's nice to be able to do that, to understand how this works. So I never like to have a for loop within a for loop. I always like to take the inside for loop and break it up into a method here. So I'm going to add a method here, public void, public static void. And it's going to print 1 line. So I'm just going to print line. Maybe I don't want it to be confused with the normal print line. So this is a times line, maybe, or something like that. And I'm not going to make any parameters to start. And then I'm just going to take this code for this for loop. And I'm going to do the print line too, because that's part of the printing of the line, I think, and put it all down here. Clip the formatting a little bit. Now it has a local variable here, but it has this X, and the X comes from the main routine. So up here, I would want to call my print timeline here. But again, I can't run this. If I try to run this, it's going to give me an error. I have an undefined symbol here. The variable X is undefined here. And I have it up here. I just don't have it down here. So I want to pass this X down to here. Now so I want to add that. It's up here. It's an integer. So I want to pass it to this. Now I can change the name, or I can leave the same. I'm going to leave the name the same for now. I'm just going to say int X here. And then I'm going to put, when I call the parameter, it's going to want me to pass X. So I have this loop I'm doing X, and with each X, I call print the timeline, and I pass X down. Down here, this local version of X will be initialized, and I can use the X down here. So I'm passing this down to this loop. Here now I can run this, and it'll run this fine. So this will work. In fact, I can test this out without even this loop here. I can just try things like, let's say I comment this out. I can just run my loop and say like print timeline with 44. And that'll just print out 4, 8, 12, 16, the multiplication line of the multiples of 4 up here. And then I want to do this a bunch of times, so I put it in this loop here. So this is what I have now, and I could do it. I often like, this is another for loop. I like my for loops being methods, so I could have another method here called print table public static void print table. I'm going to say I don't need any parameters to start. We'll see. And I'm going to take this for loop and put it in here. And up here, I'm just going to say print table. For this, and now this should run. So here's my table, and I do 10 times for each time I call print line and pass it the X, the value I'm doing. And down here, once in print line, I'm just looping through and printing out that line and putting a print line at the end of that line. That's a nice way to set this up, I think. Question is this easier? I mean, the goal is organize it so it's easier to understand. So the question is this easier to understand than this? You know, we had this loop like this. Is this one a little easier to understand or not for this? So that's part of our question is does this help? I think this print timeline helps. Maybe that's not the best name for it, but again, I'm not sure if this helps. I think it helps a little bit. I'm used to doing it that way, but we could not. Maybe this is too many methods here. So one thing is just see if it organized. The other thing is, can you make it more flexible here? So like here, right now it's set up to do a 10 by 10 multiplication table. What if we wanted to change that? Do we want to pass in maybe the starting and ending values here, or at least the ending values for this stuff? So do we want to do it? So we could add some more parameters. We could add an integer for an ending value. And then we could use that, instead of always going to 10, we could use that ending value here. And then when we call it, we could say, oh, I want to go from 1 to 10, or I want to go from 1 to 12. And now we'll run this from 1 to 12 lines. But now we're only going from 1 to 10 this way. So if we're going to do that, we probably want to send the ending value to this print line, because again, we're still doing 10 there. So maybe we want to pass int end value down here and go use that. But now when we call this print timeline, we have to pass two parameters, the X and the ending value here. And they have to be in this order. So X is good, and then the other one would be 12. But again, I want to use whatever we passed up here. So I want to use the ending value here that I've gotten. I was passed the ending value. I want to send it on to the next routine also. So now it should do, if I do 12, let's do 15. See if it'll work. I change it to 15 and run it. And run this. Okay. There, it should print off the timetables from 1 to 15 on each line and the 1 to 15 on each row, or 15 rows for that. Now this one didn't have any return types, so I think I'm going to do another return or practice problem with a return type so I can see that. But this one did have a couple parameters, which I thought was good. Let's look at these some more. So I'm going to do this test grading one here and look at that one for this. So I'm going to do this one. So why don't you try that one? We have some starting code here. I'm going to start a new project. I'm gonna grab this main and put that over here. I'm gonna need my import. I didn't grab that here. And we can run this, see how it works. So enter a test score. So let's say I got 78 on a test. Right now it says your grade is C and then your grade is D. That doesn't seem quite right there. So looks like we got some sort of mistake there. Oh yeah, I see. A score, B score, D, B score. Or this actually should be the C score. If it's between the D and the C score, it should be there. It's interesting. I didn't know that was there. Let's see if run this again. Yeah, that looks better. Maybe I'll fix this. Okay. All right. And what does this ask us to do? Add a method that includes all these statements and prints out the grade here. So again, we have them enter a score and then we test here. We want all these ones that print out the score here and put those all in a method. So again, I'm going to want maybe just move these initially into a method and call that here. This time I'm gonna, again, you can put your methods before or after the main. I'm gonna put this one up at the beginning just to do it differently this time. So static void. And what I want to call this, so this is gonna be calculating the grade or the letter grade. Like that. So see if you're doing this, see if you can move these things up here and call this method there, and then see how that works. So again, I moved our if-then statements up into this calculate grade method. I called it down here, but I'm getting all these errors because it needs these scores for this. So some of them I could just move up there because I don't need them maybe down here for these. So some of these I could just move up there rather than pass them up there. But certainly every time the test score is going to be different. So I'll need the test score up here. So I'm going to pass the test score up here. So I'm going to say test score. And I'm going to get the test score up here. And again, I always say what type it is. So the test score is an int. I still need these scores here. And so one thing I'm going to talk about is scope here. If you have, like, these are constants, they're not changing. So in Java, often with constants, we put them in all uppercase here and we make them final. So we say final int, which means that they're not allowed to change or be reassigned or input or anything like that. And so I need them everywhere in this class. So we haven't talked too much about, but I can declare variables not just in the main or in my method, but in the class itself. So I can actually take these variables here and put them in the class itself. Now, when I do that, I've got to be careful because I've got to make them static. So I have to say final static int. I have to add this static here. And again, we'll talk more. Well, you'll learn more about what static means not in this class, but in future classes. But if you want variables that are everywhere in your method, you have to declare them as static here. So and again, often with constants, we'll do this. We'll want the constants just declared once here as a fix and not have to have them other places. So we'll say final static int, and we'll have all of our constants up here. And then we can use those in our methods, including the main method down here. So now let's see if this is working. Enter a test score. Now, if you didn't want to do that, you could pass in all the scores to this method. You could add a whole bunch of parameters, the A score, B score, whatever you need. We need A, B, C, D, and F scores here, and we need the top scores. So you could list those all here if you wanted for this and pass them all in as parameters. But that's a lot of stuff for things that are constant here. I'm going to try to do this next thing. I don't think we've looked at this very much, but one thing we'll want to do is ask the user to keep entering a value if they enter a wrong one. So like right now, they want a test score. And again, we expect it to be something between 1 and 100. So if I entered something like 230, it should be too high. And now it just says score must be 100 or less. But it doesn't ask me to enter another one here. We do some checks here. But we want to them to enter another score for that. So how do we do that? What if we want them? So we want to repeat this, loop over this, ask them to enter a test score and check it out. If it's wrong, we want to loop back up and ask them to enter the test score again. So that sort of stuff is going to require some sort of loop here. I don't know how many times I'm going to go through the loop, so it can't be a for loop there. It can be a while loop or a do while loop. I always want to do it once. So in my mind, it should be a do while loop because I want to do it once. So I want to maybe do a do up here. And then down here, I'll do while something is true. Let's put it in parentheses for now. Do while something is true. And then I'll do this. So I'm going to do this, ask them here, and I'll print off stuff. And I'll do this while, again, while I can actually grab some of this stuff while my test score is too big, or, and how do I do it, or the test score is too small. I want to do this. Now, test score is a variable here I'm declaring. It has to be declared outside. It's not, I can't use it here because, again, of scope. It is declared inside these brackets and only good inside the brackets. So I've got to move it out. So I've got to say, don't declare it there, declare it up here. And then right here, I would just use it. So we have to kind of set it up, initialize it outside of our loop here so that we can use it in our while condition. And down here, we'll need it. Now let's see if this works. So if I enter a test score that's too big, 343, it says, sorry, score must be less, 100 less, enter a test score. So now if I enter a correct one, it should click. What if I enter something that's too small? Negative 87. Score must be positive. Sorry, it must be less than 100. And then it should work. Now, I'm going to move this. So I've got this complicated input thing here. I'm going to move that into its own method here. And that's what we're doing. Add a method to ask the user to enter a percentage and return that and check that it's a legal percent. So I'm going to move this whole thing into its own method. Public static void get test score, maybe. And I'm going to move this whole thing up there and do it inside that method. And then I'm going to call get test score down here. But I've got to decide how we want to set this up. I'm going to need the test score variable up here, and I'm going to need to return it down here. So I'm going to have to decide how I want to set this up and pass the test score around or whatever. So how would I do that? Let's think about that. So the first thing I want to do is pass in the test score up there. I have this test score variable that I can pass up there. So I'm going to say get test score, pass the test score variable up here, read it. I'm going to open my scanner. I need up there. I don't need it even down here. So I'm just going to move that up here. I just need it in this one spot. So I'm passing the test score up here. going to give me an error here because my variable test score may not have been initialized. So I'm going to just initialize it equal to 0 to start with. So I enter a test score, and it's going to tell me my grade is failing here, even though I gave a test score of 87. So I go up here, I pass the test score up here. Here's my test score. Now I use this test score up here, and I read it in and set it. But that is never getting back down here. This test score down here is never getting updated. When you pass a parameter up here, it just copies the value up here and initializes that. If you change it here, those values never get sent back to the main program here. What we want to do is return the test score here. So what I want to be able to do is when I'm done, I'm going to say return the test score. And if I'm going to do that, it can't be a public static void. Again, this will tell me change the method type to int. It's got to be a public static int. And then when I call this, I want to store this in my test score. So I'm going to say test score equals get the test score, pass it up. So this will work technically. And gives me a correct grade. Now, one thing is I'm initializing this test score, but I don't really need it here. I'm going to delete it here, and I'm going to make my own variable here called test score. That I'll use. Now, I find it complicated when I have test score down here and test score down up here. So I'm going to maybe rename this one. I'm going to go to refactor rename and just call this score. So up in my little method here, I'll have the score here. And then in the main procedure, I'll have this test score. I'll call get score, and it will return the score, and I'll save it into my test score variable. I'm actually going to combine these into one statement here. So I'm going to say int test score equals get the test score, initialize it there. So it'll go up here, keep reading in the score value, and eventually return that and save it into this test score value. I can actually even eliminate this variable. I'm getting the score and I'm just passing it down here. I can actually do this. I can call this method right here and put some space there and not even do it here. So I can say calculate the letter grade, and what to use from it is get the test score. So I'll go up there, get the test score, and use that as the parameter in here. So you can actually call a method inside as a parameter to another method, and it'll do the inside one first, get the score, and it'll return that here. Now, sometimes beginning students find that confusing there. So if you find that confusing, you can just do it this way. Two-step process. Call it, save it, and then call it here. I got to get my parentheses matched up. I like this one because I'm returning a value. I'm going to do one more value return here. What if I wanted to here, I want to change that first method so it returns a string. What if I don't want to always say your grade is? What if I want to say your exam score or your midterm score is, or something like that? Now, if I want to do that, I have to change this line, this line, this line, all these lines there. So I want to change calculate letter grade to return a string. So I'm going to say return a string. here. And rather than printing it out each time, I'm going to just say return on A, or return a B, or return a C. Each one of these will be a return statement. Return an A, B, this will be a C, this will be a D, and this will be an F. Now the computer requires you to have a return statement always, and it's not quite sure if you always return here. So it's going to want to have one more return here. And if we get down here, this is going to be an error. Test score. If we get down, if we return there, something's wrong. It wasn't any of our legal test scores. So I'm going to have the default return at the very end to say that. Now, this is going to return a string, calculate stuff. So when I call this, I'm going to get back a string. I can put this in a print statement. So I can say system.out.println your midterm grade is, and then call that. So now if I run that, enter my test score, it'll do that. Now all my printouts in one place. And again, if I want to change this, I can change it in one spot and run it again, and it'll be all changed. In fact, we generally do this. We almost always want, when we calculate a string or whatever, don't print it out in our method up here. We want to return a string, because in reality, often when you're doing like a real program, you want to display that on the screen. You're not printing it out, so you want to take that screen and put it in a text box or some box on the screen or something like that. So this is looking pretty good. The one thing is that there are some people that don't like to have multiple returns. And when we're testing things out and whatever, we don't want to have multiple returns. We want to have just one return. So if we wanted to only have one return at the end here, how would we do that? So what we do is we just make a string to hold the letter grade. And then each time we would set the letter grade equal to like A. And then at the end, we would return that letter grade here. So rather than saying return error, we would return the letter grade. So we would just do this, assign the letter grade each spot in here. So we initialize the letter grade to something, and then if it's up here, we'd reassign to A or B or C or D or F, and then we return it. Now, what do we initialize it in? Well, this will only be, we'd only return this if something went wrong and we didn't do one of these things. So by default, I'm just going to put in our error. Test score. So we're going to say bad test score. The letter grade will be that. And assuming that it'll be reassigned at one of these other places here. And then we just have one return at the end. Now we run this. We can try out different values and finally enter a correct value and get our exam score. One of the goals of the practice problems is just to get you to keep practicing these things. So try these out, see how it goes.